My name is Bob Huber, and I'm from Robesonia, Pennsylvania, and I'm at this moment 88 years old. It was a Sunday afternoon. It was morning over in Hawaii, and we got the news over the radio, and I got the news when I came back from hiking in the mountains behind Robesonia. That was my favorite pastime, and I got back and I heard this news on the radio. I heard Roosevelt's speech and all that, and it didn't have much meaning to see. At that time I was 17, and I think the implications of it I didn't understand it at the time. It was far away in Hawaii. We knew the war was going on in Europe, and this is the first time that it had come to our shores, as close as it could, and it didn't have an impact on me. What did have a bigger impact was 1939 when Hitler invaded Poland. I was carrying a newspaper, a local newspaper, and I was reading these headlines as I walked down the street, passing out the paper. So, Hitler invades Poland. This is September of 1939. And I didn't realize that at that time I was 13 years old, that in another 5 years I'd be fighting Hitler, So I think another thing at that time before Pearl Harbor was in our school we studied or read Hitler's Mein Kampf. And I don't remember if it was a required reading or it was whatever it was, but people were surprised that a small school like Robesonia wouldn't have Mein Kampf there. And I think we learned more about Hitler at that time than we learned about the First World War. I don't even remember studying about the First World War. I studied more about the Crusades than we did about First World War. But anyway, the attack on Pearl Harbor, I didn't realize it at that time that I had just graduated from high school in May of that year. I started working at my eventual life work at Textile Machine Works as a machinist, apprentice, and we didn't realize that three big things happened that year. I graduated, I started working, and then Pearl Harbor, all in 1941. And I started school in 1929 when the stock market crashed. Wow. So I started in a big event, and I graduated in a big event, and it was mind-boggling to my mind, looking back at that time. But I worked then at Textile. I was a machinist apprentice, and I worked there for a year and a half till I got drafted. Oh, you got drafted? I got drafted in 1943 in February. And they had the age at 21, and then and I kept out of it that way. And my family didn't want me to enlist because my mother was widowed, and the three of us boys. So I didn't enlist, I just kept working. And then finally they dropped the age down to 18. And I was 19 at the time. Then I got drafted in February of 1943.
Did your brother serve?
Yeah, my older brother was in the medics. He was 3 years older than me. My younger brother was in, he graduated in 44, would have, but he enlisted too, and he was in the Air Force. So I was the only one in harm's way, so to speak.
After you were drafted, how soon were you inducted?
Within a week, I got my notice, and then we had a report up at New Cumberland, and a train went right up from Reading to Harrisburg and picked all the draftees up along the way, and I got on the troop train, so to speak, to start with, without being in the Army. But we got up there, and it was interesting. We got there, and we passed these prisoners of war. They were Italians, I thought, and they were playing volleyball. And I thought, well, these guys are playing volleyball, and we're going to the Army and didn't know what was going to happen to us. I thought it was a little strange.
Sure.
And eventually in Camp Carson, we met German prisoners of war. So my Army experience had started with the Italian prisoners of war, and then in Camp Carson with German prisoners of war. I met one of these prisoners of war over in Halle, Germany, at the end of the war, when we went on tours, you know. So it was an experience getting into the Army. I had experience in camping and that stuff in the Boy Scouts, so I was aware of that, of what was going to happen as far as living outdoors. And I think the biggest problem I had was getting shots. You know, we got a shot in each arm, and it was tetanus shots and all that stuff that you get. And I got, my arms ached so much I couldn't hardly lift my duffel bag over my shoulder, you know. It was pretty painful, but it went away.
What's the most memorable thing that sticks out from your training camp, your training experience?
Oh, well, we went, I think up where we got equipped, you know, going in the Army, I asked to be, you could have a choice which branch you wanted to get in. So I said I wanted to go in the Navy. And they said, well, you can't, because your teeth don't match. The bite wasn't right. So I think they just wanted more people in the Army. They were getting enough people enlisting in the Navy and the Air Force. They wanted people in the Army because they knew that eventually they were going to have to invade Europe, and they need a lot of warm bodies there. So I got in the Army, and I didn't regret it. In fact, I got to like it.
So what was your trip like overseas? What was that like?
Oh, we got on a troop train in New York City, and we left from New York Harbor, past the Statue of Liberty, and in my mind, I knew that I'd be passing her on the way back. I had no doubts that would happen. It took us 11 days to get from New York to the coast of France. We were the first troops to go directly to the coast of France. And we had 60-ship convoy, the largest convoy at that time. And we could only go as fast as the slowest ship, which was probably a tanker. And we had one submarine scare alert, and we just started zigzagging, and of course that slows you down. So it took us 11 days. Interesting, when I went back on overseas battlefield tours, I timed the flight from New York to the coast of France. Same as it took us 6 hours compared to 11 days on the troop ship. But it was an experience. I didn't mind. Some people got pretty seasick. Just there were no storms or anything, but it was just the ocean movement. It gets a lot of people queasy. I didn't mind it at all. But we got to you want to go into when we landed in New York?
Oh, right.
Okay, there were 2 ships carrying our division. The one ship anchored at Cherbourg, which had fixed up after the Germans had blown it up, you know, before we captured it. And they could only handle 1 ship at a time. So our ship, with the rest of the division, landed on the beach at Utah. And we went ashore on these steel railings that they had there. And we got ashore without getting wet feet. We just walked in there. That's where they're unloading the supplies. Because Cherbourg couldn't handle that much. So we went to an apple orchard in the Cherbourg Peninsula and pitched our tents there in the apple trees, and started a little training, exercising, and that. And then eventually some of us wound up on guard duty on trains going from the coast there into Paris. We were trying to stop the thievery that was going on, you know. The trains could only go during the daytime because the rails had been blown up, and the engineers, the French engineers, had to see ahead on the rail and see what's proper back there to run ahead, you know. So they parked for the night, and that's when they were stealing stuff. And it was pretty bad, so they put armed guards on us. And they let everybody know that there was going to be armed guards with live ammunition, and that stopped the thievery then. But we went back and forth to Paris, all during September and into October when they sent us up to go into Holland.
So Paris had already been liberated.
Yes, it had, just before we got there. So it was a liberated city, and we'd stay in Paris overnight, and then next day we'd go back to the coast, get another train load.
And were the French pretty welcoming? Did they love having you?
I didn't get much contact with the French, except we stayed in hotels and the room, the clerk there, that's all I got in contact with. But I did get to meet a classmate of mine in Paris. I got to meet a classmate of mine in Paris, and he, I don't know how we got arranged him. He was in the area, and I was in the area, periodically. But we met at a cafe in Paris and had a reunion. There were 10 boys in my class, and 2 of us met in Paris. That was amazing. I don't know if it ever happened before or since, but yeah, he was. It was amazing. I liked Paris at the time. It hadn't taken much damage because they had declared an open city, and so it didn't get bombed or bombarded at all, and so everything was complete when we got there. But it was. I've gone back now on battlefield tours, and it's a little different now. I didn't even go up the Eiffel Tower then or on a battlefield tour. I just stood where Hitler had stood and watched his troops go by, and we stood on the beach and looked over at England where he had stood, and he said he's going to do what Napoleon didn't do. He's going to invade England, but it didn't happen. But we saw the white cliffs of Dover, in the distance, and walked down to the beach, and it was a nice. I went on the cemetery, and we found out from one of the cemetery superintendents that there are about 5 Timberwolves buried on D-Day cemetery, and we wondered how that happened. He said, "Well, when we got over there, there was a squad of mine-clearing people from our division, and they went to one of the bunkers, and it blew up and killed about 5 of them. Now, we had heard rumors that there was cigarette smoking, but I don't know what happened. They might have been booby-trapped or something like that. But it blew up and killed them, and they're buried there on the D-Day cemetery. The rest of our division's up in Holland or in Belgium.
So the first action you saw them was in Holland.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
We relieved the British 49th Division in Belgium, just on this side of the Holland border. And they were 49th Polar Bear Division, and we relieved them division for division, and we never saw them. This is all done at night, and they just disappeared. And just last year on a battlefield tour, we met them again in the same town on the same day in October, 23rd of October. A few years later, of course. But we met, there were 6 of us veterans, and there were about maybe 10 or 15 of them. They outnumber us quite a bit. But we had a ceremony in the town there. They have a monument to the 49th, and they put a monument there to the 104th. And we had a representative of the King of Belgium there, and we had ambassadors there. And it was a beautiful thing. And then that evening we had a reception in a nearby town hall. And I tried to talk to them. I couldn't understand them, and they probably couldn't understand me. But they're a nice gang, the Brits are okay. And we got along good. We're going to go back next year. We're going to meet them again. Yeah, it's sort of a nostalgic type thing, we had a better relationship with them than, of course, with the Germans. But we went into Holland, and we were there for 3 weeks, and we chased the Germans out because they had captured the port of Antwerp, but the estuary there was controlled by the Germans. They just moved up and down their gunboats, and they couldn't use the port, and they needed it because that was the closest port to the front lines. And our job was to chase the Germans out, and we did. and chased them all the way up to the end of Holland, on the top part of Holland, and they skedaddled. And then we took us from Holland by truck over to Aachen, across the German border on my 21st birthday. November the 8th, I'll never forget it. It is neat. But back in Holland, on our first night, our sergeant stuck his head up with a dike at night and got killed. And I was right aside of him. And so overnight, I became a staff sergeant. And nobody else in my outfit wanted it after what happened to him, but I took it. I liked the pay.
And you kept your head down.
Yeah, I kept my head down. But he had come from the artillery just before we came over here. We were short on uncoms, and he didn't have any infantry training, or he wouldn't have stuck his head up over the head. No, we knew better than that. But that was the first casualty and it happened at night, so I actually didn't. But the medic came and declared him, gone. So he was KIA, killed in action. But I had another close call there in Holland. We dug foxholes as deep as we could. The water level was pretty high, so we could just dig it deep enough that we could lay out flat and be down below ground level. And I got back to my foxhole after leaving it, and there was a dud shell laying in my foxhole, an 88 shell that wasn't exploded. And if I had been there, it would have hurt a little bit. But it was either that they didn't arm it properly before it was shot or fired, or it was something that happened to it in the manufacturing of it. A lot of sabotage went on, by slave laborers and so on. So that saved my life in that case. And our captain, the first death of a captain in our company happened in Holland. He was looking for a sniper who was in a church steeple, or they thought he was there, and he was standing on the upright, looking through binoculars at this church steeple with his captain bars on his shoulders, and the guy shot him right through the head. So that's the first of two captains that got killed during the war. And we lost one lieutenant too that was killed. So it was a shooting war, and you have close calls in the war, and sometimes shells don't necessarily have to hit you, but the shrapnel does you harm. So I got through the whole war without getting a scratch. I think there were 5 in my company that happened, that they got through unscathed. But we got through Holland, okay, got over to Aachen, the 1st Division had just taken it, so we relieved them and relieved another division, and foxhole by foxhole, and we, from there we fought our way to the Ruhr River, and there we had to wait because the Germans had blown up the river upstream, the dam, and this is a raging torrent. It went from the size of the Tully to the size of the Mississippi. It's just a raging torrent, and no way you could span it with the engineers, or you couldn't wade it, you couldn't drive tanks across it, you couldn't even take an assault boat across it. So we had to wait there. And then in the meantime, the bulge happened, December the 16th. So that slowed things up. We were on the edge of it. We were in the 1st Army, but we were away from it. So we just spread out and went into active defense. And when that bulge went down, then we had to wait till the river went down. And meanwhile, we were practicing in the rear on a river that was back there, and we practiced paddling across. And our captain said, if you aim upstream and paddle like crazy, the flow will take you across them. So we did that. And February the 23rd, we crossed the Ruhr, and we had, I think it was at 3 o'clock at night, we had to get the assault boats. The engineers had brought them up as close as they could, and we could take them, 12 to a boat, carry them to the deep water where they could get in, and we tried paddling upstream, and it worked, went straight across. And one boat in our company didn't make it. They got carried downstream by the river, and they were shot up pretty bad. But as I understand it, nobody got killed. But they went downstream and got shot. But we got across safely, and we cleared up the town nearby in 15 minutes, and we captured some prisoners. And our captain asked one of the prisoners what's going on up ahead in the next town, and he didn't use any torch or anything. He just pulled the bolt back in his carbine and said, "Let's talk." And the prisoner could speak English, and he told us it was about a mile away as our next objective. He said they had zigzag trenches in front of the town, machine guns in each end of it, and they had 10,000 teller mines in front of that. And these were mines that, of course, exploded when you stepped on them. When you stepped on them, and they do you pretty good harm. So we didn't know how we were going to do it, and the captain thought, well, we'll take a BAR and fire a path through the mines and follow that. So while we were deciding this, the battalion called up and said to hold off the attack. We were going to do it at night. But the company aside of us hadn't come up yet, and we had our flanks exposed. So we called it off and did it the next morning. In the meantime, they found a road to the minefield that the German trucks had used to deliver the mines. So we followed the mine truck road. And the captain said, "Stay on the road, don't get off." And one guy did step off the road and got a foot blown off. But they said he was Mexican and didn't understand the orders, you know. So we got to the town and caught them unawares, by surprise. And we captured 300 of them. And they interrogated them, and they said, we really fooled them because we crossed the river at night. They're expecting us during daytime. And we got into the town, they're expecting us at night, and we came in during the daytime. So we had them all mixed up. So it worked out pretty good. Sometimes things work out the way you don't expect it. Then from the Roer River, we went into Cologne. And that wasn't too bad a job because they had pulled the main body across the Rhine, and all they had behind was rear guard action, which were old people and young kids. And we took the town, and as the beginning of March. And we were the first troops to capture Cologne since the Romans in 415. And that's the number of our regiment, 415. So I didn't know at the time. I found that out on one of my trips over there and looking in up literature. But we got into Cologne, and we had to wait around to see how we were going to cross this river, you know, that steep banks there. It wasn't like the Ruhr where it went straight across. So we, in the meantime, we were about a week there, and here they captured the Remagen Bridge, the First Army. No, it was the 9th Armored Division in the First Army. And they captured this, and Bradley called Eisenhower and said, "What do we do now?" Eisenhower said, "Get all the troops you can across the bridge." So they called us, and we went down there. And by the time we got down, they had built a Bailey Bridge across, a pontoon bridge, and we went across on trucks, across the Rhine in grand style. I felt like I was on a tour of Germany, like a tourist. But we got across, and they had a bridge hut set up over there, and the First Army went up one side of the Germans in the pocket there. The 9th Army went up the other side. We met at Paderborn and captured 250,000 Germans. The last big remaining army intact, and we captured them. Then we headed for Halle and the Elbe River. And on the way, we captured Friede concentration camp, Nordhausen. And I wasn't in that. I think our 414th was in the middle. We were on the one flank, and the 413th was on the other. But the 414th was following the Third Armored Division, riding the tanks and so on, and they came on Nordhausen, and they called for all the medics in the area to come there and determine who was living and who was dead before they carried anybody out. and it was pretty horrible. We went back there, by the way, on a battlefield tour to Nordhausen, and I still had trouble there. And going into this, they made a museum out of it, and that's hard to believe. But we had, thanks to modern communications, we had on our website, we got communication from a French woman who lived in North Carolina, wanted to thank the Timberwolves for freeing her father at Nordhausen. How often do you hear it? And on top of that, on Facebook, we got a French woman in Paris, or in France, that wanted to thank us for freeing her father at Nordhausen. 2 French women, and their families wanted to thank us. Because without us, they wouldn't be here. So that's another case of modern communication, you know. Heck, we get communication from the Dutch people, you know, to us. And amazing thing about it is to have a place where you can translate the Dutch language, you know. It's an amazing thing. But the French were really appreciative of us, and the Dutch, of course. But we got to Nordhausen and freed that, and then we went on to Holly on the Elbe River. By the way, I took a swim in the Elbe River, a victory lap, so to speak. But I didn't want to swim around too much because we had orders to shoot anybody trying to come across from the German side to our side. They didn't want the Russians to capture them. So I just tread water a little bit and got out before my guys shot me by mistake. But I was the end of the war then, and they didn't know what was going to happen to us, whether we were going to be occupational troops, which wouldn't have been bad duty, or we'd go over to Japan, which wouldn't be good duty. So it took about a month till we could get out of there, because all the railroads are tied up, you know. Everybody's trying to get to France and the coast to go home. And some they even shipped down to the Pacific right away. So we finally got to the coast of France and got ships to come home. And I think we left there in July sometime, and we got past the Statue of Liberty again in New York Harbor, and I saw all these skyline buildings in New York. Not a one was destroyed. And I just come from from Europe, where every building was leveled, and especially in Germany, and to a degree in France and Belgium and Holland, and not a one of our buildings was destroyed. I think that's why 9/11 was so devastating. You know, we sent 16 million people to the war, but nobody ever brought the war to us. So that was a devastating thing, I thought. But we came back, and then we got a 30-day furlough, July and August, and while I was on furlough, they dropped the atomic bomb in August on Japan. So we didn't have to go over and invade it. They were expecting 1 million casualties, killed. And we just went back to California and got discharged from there. And that was the end of it.
What did you do after the war?
I went back and finished my apprenticeship and became a machinist. I spent 45 years there. I had a leave of absence from the war, so in effect I started in 41, and I just took off again in 46. Got married in 46, started working in 46, and had 2 children and 4 grandchildren, and one great grandchild, another one on the way. So it was a successful life. Then my wife died in 2003, and ever since I've been going to reunions and going on trips overseas. We're going on my 6th one next year. In spring we're going over again. This time we're going to go to Holland briefly and then spend the rest of the time in Germany.
You know, there's a book that Tom Brokaw wrote that calls your generation the greatest.
Right.
Do you agree?
I agree, yeah. Because we were not strengthened by the Depression, but we survived it, you know. I, for one, thought everybody lived that way, you know. We were all poor, and then along comes World War II. And either we went in the service or we worked in the plants, you know, and made the materials that were used. It was defining moment for me, the Depression, the war, and then, of course, the peace afterwards. I go out and give speeches, high schools, senior citizens, fraternal organizations like the Lions Club, and you get some interesting questions. One of the high school kids asked me how I survived the war and the life sentence. Now, you can't get too spiritual to high school kids. So I just give them a generic answer, which is a form of the golden rule. Feel good about yourself and feel good about others. And then one of the Lions Club, they asked me how I, as a combat veteran, think about the way the country's going. You know, and that's a loaded question, too. You could spend hours talking about that. But I gave them a generic answer again. I said I felt optimistic about the war, World War II, and I feel optimistic now. Too many guys died to have the country go in the tank. We won't let it happen, or our kids won't let it happen. Just like the TImberwolf Association, you know, we got too old to run it, so now the TImberwolf pups are running it, and somebody's taking over. Yeah. So we got through it pretty good, I thought, and I think that what we did and what everybody else did. Oh, by the way, one of the women in the senior citizens asked me a question. I told them there were 16 million men in the service. She got up and said, there are also some women in there. So I had to modify it now and say there are men and women. But it's a generic term also. 16 million men at arms, you know. You don't say 16 million men and women at arms. And there weren't any women in my part of the service, you know. We just didn't associate with that.
So what's your best memory of the time you served?
Of my life or
The time you served.
the time I served? I think the memories of serving with these people, it's very emotional thing when you think about it, because they're very good people, and we all got along good from all parts of the country, different accents, different cultures, and my biggest thing was understanding the people from the South, and of course they couldn't understand me. One guy from New Orleans called me Hubba Hubba because of Uber, you know. So you gave guys nicknames, and you got along good with them. You had to, especially in combat. You had we used black humor, you know, stuff like our number isn't up yet and stuff like that. And my wife, who was my girlfriend, or just a friend at the time, before I came over, she gave me a New Testament, or told me about a scripture reading in the Old Testament about the 91st Psalm, where 1,000 shall fall at thy side and 10,000 at the right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. I thought of that when a guy aside of me got killed. So it's stuff like that. And the 23rd Psalm, you know. I still take a walk down along the Tully, and I think of walking beside the still waters, you know. It brings back great memories, you know. Something that you can't relive anymore, but you wouldn't want to. It was the best of times and the worst of times. And I think that's lacking in this country today. I mean, you have comradeship, but you don't have it the way we had it. It's different. I think the advancement of communications and that just still boggles my mind. I mean, the kids grow up with it, it's second nature to them, but I got my second computer, and I'm still getting comfortable with it. The first one I had 7 years, and it took me 7 years to get comfortable with that. So it's a learning process.
That's great.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, that's about it.
That's great.
Okay.
Thanks for your service.
You're quite welcome.